All right, welcome to Talking Investing. I'm Tom, and as always, this is not financial advice. Today, I want to talk about something a little bit different. I've never talked about this before. I want to talk about the debt ceiling and the looming potential crisis. And I want to talk about how people have been treating it, and I'll include myself in that group as well. So I'm going to discuss in a little more detail as to exactly what is going on here, how much time we have left, and what might happen if we can't get to an agreement. So I will tell you, I basically on my live streams been saying I do think that we'll resolve the debt crisis. They will come to an agreement, prior to it turning into a disaster. And I think that's the prevailing feeling is that yes, everybody's very worried. It's a big problem, but it's all going to work out in time and, it's okay. And it's a little bit being ignored. And I want to show you a headline that I think totally sums up how I have felt about this, and I think a lot of people have. Okay, so this was from NBC News a few weeks ago. As debt default looms, America yawns. So that's a little bit, I find myself guilty of this as well. Whether it's crisis fatigue or a belief that things will work out at the last minute, which is the camp that I've been in all along, and there's a track record of that. We have precedent of this being pushed. Although I will tell you, this is the second worst it's ever gotten, and in a few days, it's going to be the worst it's ever gotten. Americans have not been pressuring their leaders to solve the debt ceiling standoff. If you enjoy this content, please remember to subscribe to the channel, smash the like button, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a video. Getting subscribers makes a big difference in the algorithm, so I really do appreciate it. If you guys do like this, and if you're watching on a consistent basis, I really would appreciate it if you would subscribe to the channel. Thanks so much. Okay, I don't want to read this whole article, but I think this paragraph basically sums it up. A divided Congress has only about 3 weeks at the time of this article. This is now 1 week. We are 1 week away from running out of money to raise the country's borrowing limit and thereby keep America from defaulting on its debts. Default has never happened before and could push the U.S. and global economy into harrowing territory, economists say. But for many Americans, that scenario remains an abstraction far removed from day-to-day concerns. And there are signs that the crisis-weary population wants to sit this one out. So obviously we've had a lot of global events, a lot of geopolitical crisis, a lot of financial crisis. We've gone through one thing after the next, and I think there is fatigue, and this one seems very political, which people tend to dismiss and feel like, well, this is a lot of grandstanding, but in the end, they'll do what they always do, and it'll all be fine. But I will tell you, we are now 7 days away from running out of money. And I want to explain what that means because I don't think that the press has done a good job of explaining exactly what the debt ceiling is and what's really going to happen. The first thing is, we've already hit the debt ceiling. That happened many months ago. And I don't think people understand that. So I want to get into that a little bit, talk about that, and then talk about what happens next. And what's the real problem that we're 1 week away from? 2023 has been a tough year for YouTube. YouTube revenue is down. So if you want to help support the channel, if you enjoy this content, you can help support the channel by becoming a member. We try to keep our membership price very low. It's only $5 a month. You can become a member by hitting the join button on the YouTube page. It's right next to the subscribe button. Again, it's only $5 a month. There's a bunch of content that's for members only. We have a once a week members only live stream, and we have a members only Discord that I'm active on a daily basis. So I do think it's worth its $5. And again, it does help to keep this channel going on a daily basis. So I want to take just one moment out to thank all of my existing members. It's much appreciated. And also to welcome any new members. On January 19th, 2023, the United States hit its debt ceiling, leading to a debt ceiling crisis, part of an ongoing political debate within Congress about federal government spending and the national debt that the U.S. government accrues. Okay, so you're going to see we've been talking about hitting the debt ceiling. We hit the debt ceiling 5 months ago. So we are already at the debt ceiling. The United States cannot issue any debt right now. There are other things that they can do. So what's really happening, this is more about cash flow. So borrowing is one of the ways that the United States can pay their bills. Obviously, collecting taxes and other forms of revenue. There are some emergency things they can do as well. So we hit our debt ceiling in January of 2023. But we have not yet run out of cash. When the United States runs out of cash, that's really what they're calling the X day. And that's the day we have a problem. That's the day the debt ceiling crisis turns into a reality. So although we've long since hit the debt ceiling, again, that was about 5 months ago, it has not yet turned into a problem because the Treasury has had enough money and other resources to continue to pay the bills. So you're going to see here, U.S. could run out of cash by June 1st, Yellen warns. So Janet Yellen's the Treasury Secretary. The Treasury controls the money. So the Treasury is not allowed to borrow any more money because we're at our debt ceiling and they're exhausting all of their resources. And Janet Yellen is basically saying, listen, on June 1st, we're going to run out of money and we're not going to be able to pay our bills. So the question then becomes what gets paid, what doesn't get paid. We will still have money and the United States continuously collects revenue. But the problem is our expenses are going to exceed our revenue on that date. And from that day forward, we're going to have to pick and choose which bills get paid versus being able to borrow more money and pay all the bills. So the United States has never been in that position. Now, if you really, really dig into this, you'll see there have been a couple of times over the course of history, about 200 years ago, it could be argued that we defaulted on our debt. There have been a few other close calls, but for all intents and purposes, this has never happened. In 2011, which was just 12 years ago, we got within 2 days of that date. So that has happened. That's the closest we've ever been. It's really the only other time we've ever come close at all. So I'm kind of starting to wake up to this right now as we hit the 1 week mark. We're 1 week away from being in this situation. And I do think that it will be a very, very negative situation for the stock market, for global markets, and hopefully, they will get this resolved. I still, inside, I still have this default feeling that, this is too big of an issue. It will cause too much of a problem. So they will come to a compromise, maybe at the 11th hour, but it is already the 11th hour. So we are now counting down the days, and there is a chance they will let this come to a head and actually get past where we've ever gone and get to that X day where the amount of money we have to spend is more than the amount of money that we have, and we have to start picking and choosing which bills we're going to pay. So if that does happen, hopefully also they can come to an agreement shortly thereafter, but this becomes a game of chicken. Who's going to blink? Who's going to give in? And I think both sides are going to have to give in to some extent to reach an agreement, and it's obviously critical that this happens. Okay, this is an article from NPR. They say, how bad would it be? So at the very least, there would be a huge sell-off on Wall Street. In its latest analysis, UBS says the S&P 500 could fall by at least 20%. So that is a full-blown bear market, and we're just coming out of a bear market. So a 20% pullback right now would be devastating. Also, they go on to say it's hard to predict just how bad things could get because the U.S. has never defaulted on its debt. So we really don't know exactly what would happen. I think everybody's fairly certain it's not good. So these are hypotheticals, but I'll just go on to read a little bit more of this article. Analysts believe the sell-off could match or surpass a precipitous drop in September 2008 when the House of Representatives rejected a $700 billion rescue package as the U.S. was on the precipice of global financial crisis. So the Dow Jones Industrial Average dropped 778 points. That doesn't sound like much right now, but at that point, that was the largest single-day drop by points in the history of the stock market. So that was a very bad day. A default would also send the U.S. bonds market sharply lower, right? Our credit rating is at risk. Treasuries have been some of the safest investments worldwide. They are held by companies and countries the world over and used as collateral in all kinds of financial transactions. If the federal government failed to pay bondholders, it would have unimaginable consequences for the standing of the U.S. And again, this is NPR talking. This is not me. I'm just reading an article on what they're talking about, some of the ramifications could be. But I do think all these make sense. To what extent we don't know, but this will cause a cascading series of events, none of which are good. To end where I started, I've been pretty much ignoring this, just assuming that, as in the past, everybody will come to an agreement before we get to these horrible alternatives. That's what has always happened. Again, we did get to within 2 days of that back in 2011. That's the closest we've ever gotten. And the other important takeaway, I think, is for people to realize we hit the debt ceiling 5 months ago. So we're not about to hit the debt ceiling. We're about to have more bills to pay than we can pay with an inability to borrow any more money. So that's what the actual situation is. So I just want to try to make that clear to people, because I don't think there's been enough talk about this on exactly how this works and exactly what's happening. Now, again, I will hold out. I think we should all hope that somehow or another they get this resolved prior to us getting into some of these scenarios that we're talking about. But time will tell, and we only have a little bit of time left. So we are now 7 days away from this. June 1st is the day. So there's an awful lot of pressure, and, so the headlines are often talking about, talks are back on, talks are off, talks are back on. So the pressure is going to mount on a daily basis exponentially here for everybody to come to an agreement and get this behind us, so that the U.S. essentially, the United States needs to borrow more money on July 1st. If they don't come to an agreement, we're not going to be able to pay some of our bills. So we don't know exactly what that's going to look like until it gets there, and these things do have a way of sorting themselves out, but this is now on my radar in a big way. So I just wanted to put it on everybody else's radar if it's not already there. And again, I don't know what comes of this, but I do think it's something we need to pay close attention to, because it is going to affect all of the markets across the board. It's going to affect the economy. And lastly, I'll throw in my 2 cents that I think if this does happen, if the worst does happen, actually, I think there is one thing that this will probably be good for, maybe 2 things. This would be a short-term catalyst for stuff like gold and Bitcoin to be potentially a flight to safety away from these other assets that are going to be downgraded. So let's hope it doesn't get to that scenario. That's not the way we want to see Bitcoin get to its all-time high, or for our investments in gold to increase, right? There's a better way for that. So let's hope for the best. That's about all I got on this topic. So please drop in the comments any of your thoughts or any additional comments. I'd love to hear what you guys are thinking. Is everybody else feeling like me that this is fine, it's all going to resolve itself, or are people starting to get worried? And if you enjoy this content, please remember to subscribe to the channel, smash the like button, and hit the notification bell. Subscribing to the channel helps us greatly, so it is much appreciated. And I want to thank all my existing subscribers.